Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created this 3D Patriotic skull tumbler. We're starting out with a 24-ounce plump from the TIPSY Magnolia, and I have a sheet of vinyl from Gracefully Created. This come in our 4th of July bundle or Patriotic bundle and has been released on their website, and you can find that under the Brittany Barnes Creator tab. I wanted to get those drips in on top of the skull without covering them up too much. So right now I'm just measuring it out and really taking my time to trim this properly so the skull does not cover up the bottom of my drip and I don't cut off any portion of the top of like where the drip curves, if that makes sense. I wanted it to look like it is dripping from the top of the tumbler and not be cut off in any way. So I cut off portion of the stars in blue at the top, and then we're going to do the same to the bottom side. We don't need this full piece of vinyl. We just need it to go down to right below the base of our skull. So I'm also going to cut off a big portion of the bottom of this and put those two pieces to the side because they would make a very nice separate tumbler. We're going to use the hinge method to place this piece of vinyl on the tumbler. You just cut off a little piece of that backing, line it up on the tumbler, exposing a little bit of that stainless at the top so your epoxy has something to grip a hold of, and press that exposed piece down. Work your way around the tumbler, pressing the vinyl down as you're removing that back. And I always get questions of how do you trim the seam properly? So I'm going to slow this down and try to help y'all out with that. So you want to overlap your vinyl, your starting and your stopping point. You want there to be a 1 to 2 inch overlap, okay? You want to grab some painter's tape or a tape that's not going to leave any residue behind and go in the middle of that. So you should have 2 layers of vinyl at this point. You want to go in the middle of that and then place your painter's tape down so you get a straight line. In this case, I'm going to try to go right alongside of one of our stripes so it just looks even. I'm going to remove my painter's tape, the extra piece of vinyl that's on top, and then gently remove the excess vinyl underneath. That way we don't have any lumps in our vinyl. Then just make sure your vinyl is pressed down really well once you have that removed, and you'll have a perfect seam. Originally, I did not plan on adding a handle to this tumbler, but then after I popped the skull on here just to kind of map out what I wanted to do, I was like, it really needs a handle. So instead of removing my vinyl, I'm going to place the handle, which is from Dimensional Drinks, onto my vinyl right along that seam. I kind of marked where the handles are going to go with my craft knife, and then I'm going to trim out the little circles that my handle is going to go into. This was pretty tedious, and honestly I could have lifted up my vinyl and placed it back down. Since the vinyl is temporary or removable, that doesn't mean that it's not going to stick to your tumbler. It's just easy to lift up and put back in place if you make any mistakes like this. But I was afraid that since we had already cut our seam, if I did that for whatever reason, it might not line back up. So I just trimmed out the circles big enough to place our handle in. I took 80 grit sandpaper and went in those small areas and really roughed it up. I put a lot of pressure on that so I can get some deep grooves, so our epoxy would have something to grab a hold of. I also did go on the bottom side of the handle very lightly with the sandpaper. I'm going to place the handle in that area, make sure it's lined up, and then I'm going to take my painter's tape and secure the handle in place until the epoxy is cured. While that is curing, we're going to move on to painting our skull. Now, I did add a very thin coat of epoxy on this already. It is 3D printed at Dimensional Drinks, so I wanted to cover up those 3D printing lines, if that's what you want to call it. So I gave it a smooth coat of epoxy, and then we're going to go in with our paints. All of my paints are from the Crystalite company. We're using Grunge Grage, Rosy Beige, and Lovely Linen. Those are the three colors that we're going to put on here to try to get a realistic looking skull. I didn't want to do like too grungy or anything. I just kind of wanted it to look more realistic than anything. So we're going to go in all of those areas that would be darker with the Grunge Grage. And to make sure we don't have any harsh lines, after I go in with the paint, I'm just taking my finger and dabbing that out. So it does have a little bit of blend around the edge, and we can go in with our lighter colors and it's all going to blend in nicely together. Once I had really built this paint up and got the look that I wanted, I allowed that to dry for probably about 5 minutes. It doesn't take long for this paint to dry at all. And added on my epoxy to my tumbler and on the inside of our skull. You're going to slide the skull up onto the tumbler and then sit it to the side on a silicone mat for it to cure. I wanted to add some like paint splatter spots on it. I don't know why, I just thought it would look cool. So I grabbed my black Colorflex paint. I added a little water to it because it is a water-based paint, so you can water it down a little bit. Grabbed a paintbrush and just flicked some paint on there. I ended up just taking my brush and kind of throwing paint on there too. I made a horrible mess all over my desk. I was focused so much on, I guess, putting them in the right areas that I did not pay attention to anything on my desk getting covered in paint splatters. So if you do decide to add paint splatters to any of your tumblers, make sure you put something down, such as you can even use like a trash bag or some sort of plastic cover to protect all other things on your desk, or they're just going to permanently have paint splatters. Since some of those paint spots were pretty thick, I just put this to the side and allowed it to dry overnight. And then we're going to go in with our vinyl. I'm using this beautiful matte metallic red from TECKWRAPCRAFT for my offset and their new printable vinyl. This image that I downloaded from Etsy is incredibly large and it has a lot of negative, like, distress spaces in it. So once I downloaded that to my computer, I opened up the settings, selected tools, and resized it. I actually took this down way smaller than what it was, and then I uploaded it into Design Space by just dragging it over and selected complex details. So we grab all of those details that are in the image, and by doing this, it uploads so much faster, and you're not going to get that little spinning wheel that can even shut down Design Space. So once we have that uploaded into Design Space, I'm going to resize it to 3.25 inches. And since we have all of those like negative space distressing in here, the first thing we're going to do is cover those up because we do not want the cut feature to cut all of those small spots out. So we're going to create a very small offset, 0.015, highlight both your original image and that black offset, and select flatten down in the bottom right corner. This is going to put those two together and take care of all those spots. Just ignore the weird gray offset to the right. Sometimes Design Space just does its own thing. But I created a second offset for our red vinyl, and I should have done 0.035 for this one, but for whatever reason it looked much bigger of an offset than what it ended up to be. I hope that makes sense. But I did create an offset and then switched that offset over to basic cut, so it would cut on vinyl and not add it onto my print to cut sheet. Once that was cut out, I'm just going to trim off this excess vinyl because it's half a sheet and I can use it later for another project. Weeded this out, and then we're going to layer our vinyls together on the tumbler. This printable vinyl from TECKWRAPCRAFT is literally the best. I used to use the Buttercraft printable vinyl, and it is still a great product, but TECKWRAPCRAFT really topped the cake when they come out with this one. It is so durable. It's like the underlayer is thick, or I don't even know how to explain it, but it sticks down to that protective layer on the back side. So whenever you remove the excess vinyl, it just leaves your decal behind and all of the tiny details. Same with any of their other vinyls. I have always had such a good experience with any of them, and I mean, you might have to play with your cut settings or do a test cut if you're using something really fancy like a glitter vinyl or even this metallic. They can be a little bit thicker, but they still cut and weed beautifully. And even their new transfer tape, I absolutely love it. I used to have to remove all of my vinyl from my cut mats, put my transfer tape on top, and then flip it upside down and use my squeegee tool to help remove that vinyl from the back. But now that I'm using the TECKWRAPCRAFT transfer tape, I don't even have to do that anymore. I can weed it off of my mat, put the transfer tape on top, and it removes every last bit of that vinyl without leaving anything behind. And it doesn't leave any residue on my tumblers either, which is a huge plus because it is really frustrating when you're using a transfer tape and it's inconsistent with the quality. I have had that happen before with other brands, and it leaves residue behind, and then you're left trying to scrub that residue off with a product that might damage your design. And we put way too much work into this to have it damaged. So I'm going to take my little skellies and place them kind of offsetting the offset, if that makes sense, to kind of look like they're moving to the right. So I'm putting the offset to the left of them, and it's just a very small amount, but it's enough to set them apart from the stars and the stripes that we have in the background. Now, after I put my little skellies on, I decided that I wanted to add some stars to our skull. So I grabbed some of the black shimmer vinyl and our red vinyl again, both from TECKWRAPCRAFT, and cut out some stars. I do apologize, this is a star pattern that I have had forever and I'm not sure where I got it, but you can use any sort of stars, and I created a 0.035 offset, highlighted the original image and the offset and sliced it, so I got that little offset of all these stars, and it pretty much doubled what I have on each sheet. I did only plan to put them on one side of my skull, but I have absolutely no self-control when it comes to these small elements. So I did end up doing a swirl all the way around the tumbler, using up all of the stars that I had on both of my sheets. Somebody cue the elevator music. Once I had all of these on, then I did take my heat gun on low heat setting and I went all around the skull, then went back and pressed all of them down really well. This just heats up the vinyl just ever so slightly, so it helps you press them down around and in all of those lines and crevices that's on the skull, and also helps activate that glue on the back side of the vinyl to adhere to the tumbler or skull, whatever you're working on. Once that cooled down a bit, I took it outside and gave this 2 pretty generous coats of a matte clear spray sealant, and then went in with our final coats of epoxy. Now, since we did not have any epoxy on this at all, with the exception of that first layer that we did on the skull, what I will do is give this 2 layers of epoxy. I will go all over this with a very light sanding just to even everything out, sand around the top rim and all of those grooves that are on our skull, and then I'll finalize it with 2 more coats of epoxy. I want at least 4 coats on all of my tumblers, especially since we have a handle on this. We want those extra coats for durability. Now, what I'm showing you in this final video is only with 2 coats of epoxy, but like I said, I'll go in with some sanding and then finalize it with a couple more. I hope that y'all have enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below for me and I'll answer them as quickly as possible. All materials I have used will be listed down in the description with some coupon codes for you. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.